This is Matt Cush, Module 10. How will I help students realize their learning norms? I will now explain how. Number one, relationships. As a future school leader and current teacher, I have always felt that building relationships and maintaining relationships with students is the single most important thing about my job. To me, my students are not just random faces that change every year. I know my students personally. I ask about their extracurricular activities, whether they are sports, plays, or anything else. I attend these extracurricular activities as well. I know all of my students by their names and greet them in both class and outside of class by their names. I form meaningful relationships with my students. I consider myself to be a role model and mentor for my students in my community, past, present, and future. Number two, relevance. Sometimes our students do feel that their classes don't matter to them and the work that they do in class is not relevant to them. Unfortunately, this is part of education. As a Spanish teacher, I teach two classes, Spanish 3 and Spanish for Spanish Speakers 1. The battle for relevance with students was much more of an issue when I was teaching Spanish 1 and 2. Now that I'm teaching Spanish 3, it is much less of an issue. My students in Spanish 3 are very good students. They live in a diverse community with a lot of Spanish speakers. They have now been taking Spanish for 3 years. In my opinion, they see that learning Spanish is relevant to them. They also see me as a role model. They see me speaking Spanish with students and forming relationships in Spanish. This is how I show my students that the work we do in class has relevance. In my Spanish for Spanish Speakers 1 class, all of my students already speak Spanish. We speak Spanish the entire time in class. I teach my students to read and write in Spanish. This way they can truly be bilingual. I have no issues whatsoever with relevance in my Spanish speakers class. Thanks to their parents, they know Spanish is important. All I do is reinforce what their parents have already taught them. Number 3, time. As a classroom teacher, I have to budget time in class. I usually plan extra time for students that need more time to finish assignments. All students learn at a different pace. As an administrator, I would encourage all teachers to do the same. It is good to push students to do well on assignments, but it is never good to rush them through an assignment just to move on to the next assignment. I know this does happen, and I have probably been guilty of it too. In any school that I am a principal in, I would encourage teachers to provide learning that is deep as well as broad. Number 4, timing. The question is, do all students have to learn the same things in the same sequence? In theory, the answer is simple, no. In practice, usually the answer is yes. Sometimes teachers are slaves to their curriculum. They are expected to teach the same thing in the same sequence as the other teachers that are teaching the same subject. I see this every day. If a teacher decided to teach something in a different sequence, they could face backlash from colleagues, fellow teachers. I do, however, believe that teaching the same thing in the same sequence is not the best way to learn. In a perfect scenario, I do believe that students should be able to learn things in the order that fits their learning style and interests. Number 5, play. In my classroom, there's not always pressure for students to perform. In learning a language, mistakes are not only expected, but they are welcomed. When we make mistakes, we can learn from them. In learning Spanish, I have made many mistakes and continue to make them, but that means I continue to learn and improve my skills. There is a pressure for students to perform well on tests and quizzes. If they don't perform well, they will not be branded as a failure, but they will be encouraged to do better in the future. They will never be branded as a failure, even if they fail the class, because there's always more opportunities to make mistakes and to learn from them. Number 6, practice. In my class, the students learn and we practice the skill. In my opinion, the practice is deep and sustained. After the practice, it is time to test over the skill. Once the test has been taken, we do move on to the next skill. But the students do not have permission to forget any previous skills that they have learned. They will constantly be expected to call upon previous skills in my class. As an administrator, I would expect the same from teachers. Number 7, choice. At my school, students are not just following the same path as every student. As freshmen, they choose an academy that they want to be a part of. For example, they can choose the Medical Academy, the Academy of Engineering, the Academy of Education, Law, and Public Safety, among others. The students do have a choice about what they learn as part of their selective academy. They do have choices of which classes to take and when to take them. They may or may not have a choice about how they will learn. It might depend on the specific class. They do get a lot of chances to demonstrate their abilities in their hands-on academy classes. Our academy model may not be perfect, but it does offer a lot more choices than maybe a traditional school might. Authenticity. In my classes, I do believe that what we learn, Spanish, is regarded as significant outside of school. I am not totally sure about what the experts would say, but I do have a hard time thinking any expert would say learning Spanish is not a good thing. Many of my students' family members have told me how important they think learning Spanish is for their students. Employers in my diverse city also see being bilingual as a sought-after skill. In our academy model, the experts have said that it is a good model for our school community. The parents are supportive of our academies, and many local employers are a big part of the academies. We even have a floor in the hospital for our medical academy. Number 9, challenge. I like to think that in my class, it isn't just about completing assignments. My students do feel challenged. They are challenged, but for the most part, they rise to meet the challenge. It is very difficult to learn another language, but through high and meaningful standards of excellence that have been approved for dual credit through Wayne State University in Nebraska, if you ask me, I believe my students feel appropriately challenged. Application, number 10. My students' learning is not at all theoretical. They are able to use what they learn in class and apply it to real-life situations in our community. I constantly hear stories from my students about how happy they were to order in Spanish at a Mexican restaurant or to help a Spanish-speaking customer at their job. My students have and will continue to apply their learning in real-life settings. Standard correlation. Helping students achieve their learning norms supports the educational success and well-being of each student and adult because they will understand what is expected of them, why what they are doing is important, and help them understand choices that they can make about their own education and career paths. If they can adhere to the norms, they can be successful in education and in life as adults. Relevant. This assignment is relevant because it addresses certain questions that students have that come up from time to time, such as, why do we do this? Or, how will this help me? This assignment helped me to improve my understanding of student norms by putting me in both the position of a student and as a teacher, and not to mention an administrator as well. Reflection. As a future school leader, it will always be important to help students achieve their learning norms. Students need to understand why what they are doing is important and how it can benefit them in the future. As a classroom teacher, I help them do it in my class only. But as a future school leader, I need to help them see the big picture in their learning norms and see how they apply to all classes. And this is my reference, the YouTube video we watched.